Welcome back to another cave story, the Desolate Devlog, not before the storm because my playtesters and Twitter voted on a new name. The bugs that I've fixed in this build are some audio related issues like music not playing correctly and volume for sound effects not being adjusted. The third poo boss now has a ending animation and the boss fight can restart correctly, and inventory related issues like items could be switched to incorrect categories, and debt. So in an earlier build you could buy infinite items regardless of the amount of Sion you had, and the second poo boss, so now the events aren't messed up, which previously, for example, Sue would appear and then the bubble which you free her out of is also above her, which kind of is weird for like continuity. So I fixed that issue because it was related to loading saves and whatnot, I guess. I also finished walking animation desync, so now the firearm and player walk correctly. The game not reading or writing config files, because even though the root path had its benefits, it's better to delegate these files to the user path, which goes to the OS's app data paths. So for example, I guess it would work technically on Windows, but it wouldn't really work on something like macOS or maybe Linux. So I switched it to the user path, and for some reasons that's better, but sometimes the root path is better, so that's just how that goes. And an issue with the health display, which only appears in the debug console, but it wasn't one. So the changes that I've made in this build is that I've changed a lot of SFX. So this was mostly by pressing randomly on C-tone until I got sound effects that were good, or maybe I would tweak or make like one or two sound effects for myself, but my reasoning for doing this was to give the game a more unique and original sound instead of the final sounds that were used in Cave Story. Credit for the walking sound effect goes to Vizashi on Twitter. I recreated most particles using the GPU Particles 2D node, and this improved performance greatly. There was also almost no stutters, and performance was overall better because of this change, although I do want to tackle that point towards the end of the video. I changed the Chomper's color so it looks more like the beta footage. I changed the background to use parallax related nodes for a better background that follows the camera and is easier to set up and also looks more convincing. I changed the main font to BIZUD Gothic, and the reason I did this is so that I could fix the issue of certain UI elements having different pixel scales, so by having this font I don't have to worry about that and it still looks high quality. I buffed the fireball pistol because when rewatching the beta footage videos it felt a little slow in my game, so I changed it to move faster. I buffed all bosses. This is because I felt like the difficulty was too easy, and so by removing the ability to hit bubbles with the weapons you would obtain for the first 3 bosses, making it so that the bubbles are more accurate, and patching cheese methods like going in a corner on the 3rd boss, I feel like these parts of the game are more engaging. And finally, let's talk about the new additions. So I added the Central, which will act as the hub world for going to different parts of the game and whatnot. I also added some extra hanging flowers, which act as decor. I added 2 weapons, the machine gun and the rocket launcher, and for the rocket launcher I added rocket riding, which is basically just a character body 2D inside the rocket projectile. And for the machine gun projectiles, I had a GPU Particles 2D to add a trail effect to the bullets like in the original game. Also, the rocket launcher is the weapon that you use to break the brittle blocks around the game. I added some workers in the excavation site that make digging noises, and I added a sponge puzzle room which, if completed, rewards the player with another vital. And that's all for this devlog. Things are getting to a point where I can more fastly develop, even though it took me a month to complete this build, but regardless, things are in a position where I have to worry less about systems and more about new content built off of those systems. As for performance, which I want to elaborate more on earlier in the video, this may or may not be my fault, but the cause of jitter is because of the OS because if the OS refresh rate doesn't match the game FPS, it starts to jitter. These issues can of course be solved, and also some solutions are turning off VSync in window mode and turning on VSync in full screen. Although that's not how I want it to be, some solution is better than none. Interestingly as well, my theory for the artifacting and performance issues in the soap pools was that the room was very large. However, the Central was arguably just as large, if not more, and it experienced no performance issues or artifacting. And the enemies are not an issue to performance as well, they just affect loading the room. So this is an interesting predicament. I'll have to see what I can do about it until Godot 4.1 releases, but for now that's all for this devlog.